I work the front desk at a hostel in Sydney. American tourists check in constantly, but I'll never forget this particular grad who arrived with a backpack, laptop, and what he described as financial freedom. He wasn't kidding. This guy just finished his MBA from UCLA and wanted to travel before finding work. While he unpacked, he casually mentioned his monthly student loan payment was due in 3 days. When I asked how much, he said $1,400. I laughed because I thought he meant for the whole year. He stared at me with this exhausted expression and said $1,400 per month, and that's after consolidating. He'd been out of school for 6 months and already paid $8,000 without touching the principal. I asked if he could defer while traveling. He explained that interest doesn't stop, so every month abroad meant falling further behind. The worst part? He couldn't even declare bankruptcy to escape it because student loans in America survive bankruptcy proceedings. This bloke literally carried inescapable debt across oceans. Meanwhile, my flatmate, Jess, graduated from UNSW 3 years ago with a similar degree and hasn't paid a single dollar yet. She's earning $50,000 working part-time at a startup because her salary sits below the repayment threshold. Zero stress, zero collectors, zero penalties. She'll start paying automatically through taxes once she earns more. But until then, her HEC's debt just exists on paper somewhere in a government database. The American couldn't comprehend this arrangement. He kept asking what happens if she never pays, as if debt collectors would eventually appear with baseball bats. I explained that if she never crosses the income threshold, she literally never pays, and the government doesn't care because that's how the system works. He sat there processing this information like I'd just explained that gravity works backwards in Australia. Then he opened his laptop, logged into his loan servicer account, and showed me the interest that accumulated while we talked. $43 in 10 minutes. He wasn't exaggerating about any of it. I'm a graduate advisor at the University of Melbourne. Last month, an American exchange student named Tyler came to my office, demanding to speak with someone about payment plans. He'd just received his enrollment confirmation for a master's program and was already panicking about the first payment. I assured him the government would cover it through HEC's help if he qualified as a domestic student. He didn't, since he was American. He thought I meant the government would give him a payment plan with manageable monthly installments and wanted to discuss terms and interest rates. When I clarified the government pays universities directly and Australian students repay through taxes only after earning above a threshold, Tyler accused me of making fun of him. He literally said, "Stop messing with me. I need real information because I'm already $70,000 in debt from undergrad." I showed him the official government website explaining the system, and he spent 20 minutes reading every page convinced there was a catch. He kept highlighting phrases and asking what they really meant, like the page contained secret coded language. Finally, he just said, "This is socialism," and walked out before I could explain anything else. He returned 2 hours later and apologized, saying he'd called 3 different Australian friends who confirmed I wasn't lying. The poor bloke couldn't process that education. Debt might work differently than America's system. My sister manages student services at Queensland University of Technology. An American student named Madison enrolled in an exchange program and attended an orientation session about HEC's help loans. Madison raised her hand and asked, "What happens if you default, specifically whether they garnish wages or seize assets?" My sister explained that default isn't possible because repayments happen automatically through the tax system, and you're only required to pay when you're earning above the threshold. Madison pressed further, asking what happens if someone refuses to file taxes or works under the table to avoid repayment. My sister responded that technically, someone could do that, but they'd be committing tax fraud, which carries separate penalties that have nothing to do with HECs. Madison then revealed she'd been strategizing ways to avoid her American loans, including working exclusively in cash jobs after graduation, because her payments would consume 40% of her expected salary. She'd spent 6 months researching this plan. When she learned Australian graduates don't need elaborate avoidance schemes because the system already accommodates lower earners, she actually teared up. She called the whole concept dignified, which felt like an odd word choice until she explained that American loan companies treat borrowers like criminals who need constant surveillance. The exchange program ended, and Madison went home to Minnesota, still owing $98,000. She emails occasionally asking if Australia needs veterinarians. I work as a student advisor at the University of Adelaide. During orientation week, a transfer student from Texas named Connor attended a financial aid workshop. We were explaining how HECS/HELP loans have no interest, only indexation that matches inflation. Connor interrupted and stated confidently that someone was lying, because no government would operate a loan program without profit margin. He explained that America charges interest on federal student loans, specifically to fund the program and generate revenue for the Department of Education. When I confirmed Australian loans genuinely have no interest beyond inflation adjustment, Connor launched into an explanation of basic economics involving supply, demand, and lending institutions needing incentive to issue loans. He then cited a figure claiming that American student loan interest rates average 6 to 7%, which allows the government to collect revenue while helping students. One of the Australian students asked why the American government needs profit from students trying to get educated. Connor responded that the system wouldn't be sustainable otherwise, and called it financial responsibility. I pulled up the actual HEC's help documentation showing 30 years of successful operation without interest charges. Connor examined the numbers and concluded our system must be subsidized by massive taxpayer contributions that Americans would never tolerate. An Australian student pointed out that her taxes will eventually pay back her loan anyway.
Oh.
So it's effectively the same outcome, except she won't pay extra thousands in interest. Connor declared this was government overreach, and that Americans prefer individual choice, even if it costs more. He's still here finishing his degree and recently admitted his loan. Payments start at $800 monthly. When he returns home despite earning an entry-level salary, I manage a graduate employment center at the University of Sydney. An American client named Bethany received a job offer from a Melbourne tech company for $78,000 annually. She came into my office upset because she'd calculated her take-home pay after taxes, rent, and expenses, but somehow her math left her with barely anything remaining. I asked her to show me the calculations. She'd included $1,400 monthly for student loans, which seemed high even by American standards. Bethany explained she attended a private university in Boston and graduated with $120,000 in debt. The minimum payment was $900 monthly, but she was paying extra to avoid 30 years of interest. She wanted to know if Australia had any special programs for foreign residents to help manage American student debt. I explained Australia obviously can't help with American loans, but asked if she'd considered income-based repayment plans. She said she earned too much to qualify, and even if she did, those plans extend the repayment period so long that she'd pay double the original amount in interest. Then, she asked a question that floored me. Would the Melbourne company understand if she negotiated a lower salary to qualify for loan forgiveness programs? She was willing to earn less money intentionally just to reduce her monthly burden. I suggested she might want to reconsider whether moving to Australia made financial sense if her loan situation was this dire. Bethany looked devastated and admitted she was trying to escape America's crushing loan culture, where everyone her age was either living with parents or having mental breakdowns. She took the job anyway, and now works remotely from Melbourne, while sending massive payments to a bank in Massachusetts every month. She calls it her American tax. I run a cafe near UNSW and employ several recent graduates. An American backpacker named Ashley started working shifts between her travels. She was chatting with my Australian employee Liam about finances, and Ashley mentioned she needed to pick up extra hours because her student loan payment was due. Liam asked why she couldn't just pause it while traveling. Ashley laughed bitterly and explained American loans don't pause unless you're enrolled in school or approved for specific hardship deferments. And even then, interest keeps accumulating. She was paying $400 monthly despite earning maybe $2,000 from sporadic cafe work. Liam was baffled because his girlfriend graduated last year and hasn't paid anything toward HECs because she's only working part-time at a bookstore. Ashley asked what happens when the government eventually demands payment. Liam explained, payment happens automatically through taxes once income crosses the threshold, and until then, nobody cares. Ashley asked what the penalty was for not reaching the threshold. Liam said there is no penalty because that's literally how the system works by design. Ashley went silent and then asked how that could possibly be legal because in America, if you don't pay your loans, they destroy your credit rating, garnish wages, and can even seize tax refunds. She'd been making payments from Australia by transferring money to her American bank account because she was terrified of defaulting, even while traveling. Liam pointed out she was essentially paying for the privilege of having attended university, which seemed backwards. Ashley agreed, but said American loans are inescapable, and she'd accepted that her 20s would be defined by debt regardless of her choices. She asked if Australian graduates felt lucky, or if they didn't realize how good they had it. Liam admitted most graduates he knew never thought about HECs, except when tax season came around. Ashley called that dignified poverty, which was apparently an upgrade from America's arrangement. She left Australia 3 weeks later, still making those $400 payments from whatever country she landed in. My girlfriend works as a career counselor at the University of Western Australia. An American graduate student named Marcus attended a seminar about salary negotiations. During the Q&A, Marcus asked whether Australian employers expect candidates to disclose student debt during interviews. My girlfriend was confused and asked why employers would need that information. Marcus explained that in America, some employers check credit reports, which include student loan debt. And high debt might make you seem financially desperate or unreliable. He'd been preparing to address his $63,000 in loans defensively during interviews. My girlfriend clarified that Australian employers don't check credit reports unless you're applying for positions, acquiring security clearance, or handling large amounts of money. And even then, they wouldn't care about HEC's debt because everyone has it. Marcus asked, "What happens if someone lies about their debt during negotiations?" My girlfriend said there'd be nothing to lie about because the topic never comes up in normal employment situations. Marcus then revealed he'd developed an entire strategy in America for downplaying his debt, including lying about his graduation year to make his debt seem older and more under control. He'd rehearsed answers for questions like, "Why are you looking to change jobs?" That avoided mentioning his crushing loan payments. When my girlfriend confirmed that Australian graduates never discuss HECs with employers because it's irrelevant to employment, Marcus looked genuinely emotional. He said American debt felt like a scarlet letter that defined your professional identity and limited opportunities. Later, he mentioned during his American job search, one interviewer actually suggested he consider bankruptcy to demonstrate financial responsibility, which was impossible anyway because student loans survive bankruptcy. He's staying in Australia specifically because he can't face returning to that environment. My mate works for an Australian bank's mortgage division in Adelaide. An American permanent resident named Chris applied for a home loan and was shocked when the bank factored in his American student debt of $78,000. Chris argued that debt shouldn't matter because he was making all payments on time and his credit score was excellent. My mate explained debt-to-income ratio matters more than credit scores. Chris's $650 monthly payment reduced his borrowing capacity significantly. Chris then pivoted and asked if he could somehow hide the American debt since it wasn't on Australian credit reports. My mate clarified that would be mortgage fraud, and they specifically ask about foreign debt obligations in the application. Chris seemed genuinely surprised this was illegal and explained that in America, people constantly find creative ways to work around financial regulations. He'd assumed Australian banks operated the same way. When my mate confirmed they were extremely strict about disclosure, Chris asked what happens to Australian graduates with HEC's debt. My mate explained, HEC's is factored into assessments, but works through the tax system, so it adjusts automatically with income changes. Chris found this hilarious and declared that Australian graduates had government-approved debt, while Americans had real debt that followed you across countries. He was trying to be funny, but it came out bitter. Then he asked a strange question. Could he transfer his title to someone else's name after getting the loan to avoid the debt obligation? My mate explained that wouldn't help, and also would be fraud. Chris eventually got approved for a smaller loan amount, and now owns a modest unit in Adelaide's outer suburbs. He still complains that his American loans cost him the ability to buy a proper house. Recently, he calculated that, without those payments, he could have afforded something twice the size in a better location. He calls his American education the most expensive mistake he ever made. I'm a university exchange coordinator at Griffith University in Queensland. An American student named Olivia was preparing to return home after a year abroad. During our exit interview, she broke down crying and said she couldn't go back. I assumed something traumatic happened, but she explained the trauma was her student loans. She'd deferred them during her exchange year, but they'd start again the moment she returned, and interest had accumulated the entire time she was gone. She now owed $73,000 despite borrowing $68,000, and she hadn't even started repaying yet. The interest during her exchange year alone added $5,000. Olivia asked if there was any way to extend her visa and stay in Australia permanently. I explained the options were limited without employer sponsorship or further study. She then asked something that shocked me. Could she enroll in an Australian master's program specifically to defer her American loans longer? I clarified that Australian programs wouldn't defer American debt. Olivia knew that, but explained American loans can be deferred while enrolled in any accredited university globally. So she could technically spend another 2 years in Australian school while her American loans sat frozen. She'd calculated that even with the additional Australian HEC's debt, she'd still come out ahead because HECs had no interest, and she wouldn't know anything until earning above the threshold. She was essentially trying to escape one debt system by hiding inside another, more humane system. I pointed out this seemed like elaborate avoidance rather than a real solution. Olivia agreed, but said avoidance was the only strategy that made sense when the alternative was financial suffocation. She'd watched older friends in America pay loans faithfully for a decade without making meaningful progress on principal because interest kept outpacing payments. The system was designed to extract maximum money over maximum time. She didn't extend her stay, but last I heard she'd moved to South Korea teaching English specifically because her American loans would remain in deferment while she was abroad earning foreign income. She's living in debt purgatory indefinitely because actually paying seemed impossible. I'm a bartender in Melbourne and I've served enough internationals to spot the American grad spiral immediately. They order cheap drinks, split appetizers, and calculate tips to the cent. Last night, an American tourist explained his 30-year repayment timeline, like he was describing a prison sentence. He'd borrowed $45,000 and would pay $90,000 total due to interest. Meanwhile, 2 Australian graduates at the next table were celebrating new jobs and discussing when they'd start seeing HECS deductions from their pay. One mentioned her debt was $32,000, but she wasn't worried because payments were automatic and income-based. The American overheard and called over to ask if they were lying. They weren't. The American sat there processing this information while his drink went warm. He finally said the quiet part loud. American loans weren't designed to be repaid efficiently. They were designed to extract maximum profit from young people who had no choice but to participate. He'd figured this out 3 years into payments when he realized his balance had barely moved despite sending $9,000 to the loan servicer. One of the Aussies asked why Americans tolerated this arrangement. The American laughed and said because the alternative was no education and worse job prospects. So the entire generation was trapped between bad options and worse options. He finished his drink and left. The Aussies kept celebrating. That pretty much sums up the difference.